My brain always tells me, you're not smart enough, you don't have the right education, you didn't come from the right area, it takes money to make money. Those people were more brilliant, they went to the right colleges, they had family who supported them. My family thought I was insane. That voice is still living inside me. I've been trying to kill it for 50 years or 40 years.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Travis Chappell. Today I'm sitting down with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Dean Graziosi.
What's up,
himself.
everybody?
How's it going?
How's it going, man?
Thanks
Good
so
to be
coming on.
This is fun. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for having me to the studio. I mean, this place is awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we took about 8 months to get it done, so we're pretty stoked.
It looks like it. It looks like a Silicon Valley startup, just with profit.
Exactly. We're not using anybody else's money to do this.
Exactly. It makes it a little bit different. Okay, so I want to jump into some things here. There's so many parts of your story that are so interesting, and we're going to try to do a quick overview of that just for some people that to get a little bit of context first. But then we're going to get into some really big things on masterminds and networking and some awesome things that I'm excited to get into with you. So first off, quick overview. Talk to us about all of the privileged background that you came from, and how all of this was just handed to you.
Well, listen, when you're born on third base, life is easy. You know what I mean?
But seriously, I want to talk to you. I want to shed some light on your story because it is an incredible story from where you came up to where you are now, and all of it is just such an inspiration to so many people, and has been for decades now. So talk to us about what was life like for 8-year-old Dean Graziosi, and then kind of walk us through what happened.
Sure. And I'll pre-frame this. Listen, I just said this to Travis before we started. There's a million things you could be watching or listening to right now. We're inundated with information. When I was trying to find information, there was no iTunes and podcasts and IG and Facebook. There was no videos online. It just didn't exist. Yeah. And now we're inundated, and so I know that you chose us to listen to us today, and I want to tell you, I'm here to serve. And take what serves you, throw the rest away. And what I'll just say before I get into the 8-year-old version and give you a little evolution, no matter where you are today when you're listening, if your back's up against the wall, you're struggling, you feel there's no hope, I've been there, been broker than broke, evicted out of a trailer park when I was with my mom as a kid. I was broke in my 20s and thought there was nothing. I know what it's like to have a bleeding ulcer because of stress and staying up all night and not having any hope and having envy for other people getting ahead. But I also know what it's like to crack $100,000 a year and then crack my first sale. And I know what it's like to get to $100,000 a month. And I know what it's like to get to $100,000 a day. And I know what it's like to get to $100,000 before lunch. I know all those variables and all the failure in between. So there's no place, I promise you, if you're listening or watching, there's no place you are right now that I haven't been. And I'm gonna do my best to deliver value today to get you from where you are to where you wanna go. So if my story helps you see that, then great. And you don't have to have a horrific past or a horrific present to be able to go to another level. There's a lot of people that are doing okay. They're just not satisfied, because I think the biggest plight of our world, and I stole it from Dale Carnegie, is knowing we have more potential, right? Untapped potential that'll drive us all crazy. Right. We know we have more to give and we're not. It's like wearing handcuffs, right? So going back, I've never had anybody ask me a specific date. So 8-year-old Dean. 8-year-old Dean, I was living in a trailer park with my mom in Milton, New York. My parents were divorced. My mom was married for the second time. My dad was married or on his way for a second or third time. Legit lived in a trailer park. I didn't know, it wasn't like, oh, poor me, I lived in a trailer park. It's just, that's where I lived. Right? I didn't know any different.
As a kid,
you don't know any different. But my mom worked 3 jobs back then. She cut hair at Up to Date, she cleaned houses, and then she helped paint houses on weekends, and legit made about $90 a week. And I was already crafting that, I wanted to take care of my mom. If I think back at my first, we all have that initial thing that drove us. Some of it's I don't want to be like my parents, or I want to be like my parents, but better, or I don't want people to make fun of me, or just because I'm born with privilege, I want to show people I could do my own thing. We all have our own story. But I remember at a really young age, I remember thinking, my mom works way too hard. I don't see her. We were latchkey kids from a really young age. My sister and I cooked our own food, made our own beds, did our own laundry, made our own lunches. 8 years old, I made my own lunch every day.
Yeah.
I tell my kids sometimes, I'm like, you didn't like the damn turkey I gave you? How about go 2 months? And I remember a time, I just told my kids this last night, I'm digressing here and I'll get back to 8-year-old me. I moved into my dad when I was about 12 and my dad was broker than my mom. And I remember there were days where my dad, lunch was 75 cents back then, and my dad would hand me 75 pennies. And I told my kids, I'm like, would you walk up and pull out 75 pennies? I said, those days I didn't eat. Like, my daughter's like, why? I'm like, come on, you don't want to go to school some days when you think your clothes don't match. Imagine 20 of your buddies behind you, and you pull out 20 pennies. You're like, 1, 2, 3. I'm like, don't give me, just eat your damn turkey. Sorry, it was on organic bread. You know what I mean? I'm trying to be different than the kid I was, than what I had. But 8-year-old Dean, that's, and I just remember I knew I wanted more. I just wrote in a book recently, though. I have to tell you, I know this sounds nuts, but I knew at 8, 10, 12, I knew I could do more, even though the world said I couldn't. Yeah. I wasn't that smart in school. I ended up not going past high school. I barely got out of high school. I had dyslexia.
Yeah. Real
go ahead.
quick.
Yeah, no, please jump in.
Why do you think that is? Like, why so many people are put in way better situations, grow up with the silver spoon, with everything handed to them, to grow up in situations where they should be expecting high things of themselves. Why do you think that you, at such a young age, were, had a head start in your mind from where all these other kids were? Really good question. I love questions that I've never been asked for. I've never been asked that one before. I'm not 100% sure, but here's what I know. So I wrote a book called The Underdog Advantage. It's my most recent book, right? I'm not pushing that. It's an amazing book. It's on fire right now. But it's like, I was born an underdog, right? Didn't have anything. Yeah. And my kids aren't. Right. My kids are born with privilege, right? By the time I had them, I was 40 when I had my son. I'd already become successful. They don't know a life of struggle. Yeah. But I work really hard to teach them how to have an underdog mindset. But it's not easy. I have to tell you, they don't want for anything, and they're not spoiled, and they have chores, and they make money every week, but it's just different, right? So I have to help find their hunger, right? And I think we're doing a pretty good job, right? Because I obsess on it. I read books and I interview people. I get counseling once a week to help me make sure I don't raise 2 entitled kids. I was going to ask you. Let's talk on that for just a second, okay? To kind of park the other ones. I want to finish that question. You got a great question. But I do want to ask it because I have an 8-month-old son. Oh, congratulations! And, thank you. And so now before you have kids, the word parenting comes up, and you're just kind of like, whatever. Now that you have a kid, you're like, wait, how does this work? Yeah. So talk to me about a couple practical things for all the parents out there, and for me and my wife. What are a couple practical things, ways that you help your kids? You have to find ways, and I'm not perfect at it, but I literally get counseling and I work on it. And like this week, I just made a deal with them. I picked 20 personal growth books, my personal favorites. They're 11 and 13. Plus, I have a baby on the way. How crazy is that? Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna have a brand new baby in 3 months from now. At 51, back into diapers, baby. Like this week, I just picked 20 of my favorite personal growth books that I thought were okay for 11 and 13-year-old to read, and I offered them $50 a book, right? Got it. I have Sunday meetings with them since they were 3 years old, and teaching them how to find gratitude. At 3, they're running around. It might not be perfect. It's always messy, dude. But here's what I know. I talk to my kids like they were 2 years old with their entire life. And we grew into it. Like every time, I'm like, I wonder if they're getting it. A circumstance or something would come up, and they'd get it. And I'd be like, damn, that was something I put in there, stuff that I learned. So don't underestimate your kids. I've talked to my kids about drugs, about sex, about how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. I talked to my kids about porn since they were 8 years old. Because all I know, when things are taboo, if you remember the parents that were most strict, they were usually the kids that derailed the hardest. Do you remember that? The boys and the girls with the worst reputation were the parents that were like, you be home at 9, and they're sneaking out the back window. So I found a different approach. I took a lot of the things that went wrong in my childhood, and instead of just trying to guess, I hired consultants. I interviewed 50 people that I thought were great parents over the last 15 years. Again, I put everything out in the open. I built trust as the foundation of our relationship, that they could tell me anything, even if it's a total mess up, and they have, and we've been able to talk through it. But as far as
building hunger, that's the hardest one of all of them. And what I found a way to do is do it through them wanting stuff and working for it, them having chores to go work through it, them being on sports teams and letting them know that, winners win. Winners practice when no one's watching, and they win when no one's watching, right? So I got my kids to learn that practice and hard work is how people win. They love going to a game. They're both pitchers, and they both do really, really well. Yeah. They love that. I said, that doesn't happen at games. That happens when no one's watching in the backyard when you're friends. And I talk about successful people. They worked when other people partied and drank. And so it's like, it's an obsession of mine. Yeah. And what I know is I don't have the ability to just give them hardship. They don't live in a little house, and they don't, right? So, so now I have to create ways for them to fail. Yeah. I have to create ways for them to struggle. I have to create ways for them to feel like I got to do this on my own.
To have that back against the wall feeling.
Because it's really what drives all of us, you know? And I have to tell you, at a young age, so going back to your question, 8, 9 years old, I'm thinking, I got to do more. There's more for me. Everybody's wrong. Yeah. But I didn't really understand. But I remember this. I remember my Uncle Larry, when I was really young, 8, 10, 12 years old, my Uncle Larry said, what are you going to do when you're older? I said, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to have money. And he said, why? And I said, because I want to make it so my mom doesn't work so hard. It wasn't for fancy Lamborghini or for me. I just want my mom to kick, she'd come home tired and her knuckles would hurt from cutting hair and painting and sweeping floors, and her back would hurt and her legs would hurt and her feet would hurt. And I'm saying, there's got to be more. And I realized a couple of things. Again, stop me anytime because I could just keep going on. Yeah, but I remember at a young age I equated really young that hard work had nothing to do with success. It had to be hard work in the right area because my dad worked his ass off in a collision shop, worked on cars every day, grease under his nails, come home with headaches because of fumes of painting cars. My mom worked 3 jobs, neither one of them had a pot to piss in, right? So I realized at a young age, man, that it just wasn't, it was working hard in the right way.
There was a disconnect.
Yeah, there was a disconnect. Again, I don't know, I wouldn't have explained this elegantly as a 10-year-old. Right. But I might have said something like, if you, and maybe this is even too fancy, but it's as simple as if you practice every day with a bad golf swing, it doesn't make you a better golfer. It doesn't matter how hard you work, practice every day until someone comes along and says, sorry, you're holding it wrong. Sorry, you got to stand this way. Your feet are at an angle. Then practice that.
That's a baseball bat.
That's a baseball bat. Yeah, that's a crowbar. You're never going to get good. That's funny, Travis, but it's true. And I equated that, but I didn't really know what to do. I just remember my Uncle Larry said to me, and I never felt smart because I had dyslexia, so I always struggled reading. So when you're always the last in class, when you're always in special ed, man, I hated it. I wanted out. But I remember my Uncle Larry saying, well, if you want to be successful, Dean, what college are you going to go to, and what's your career, and where are you going to try to get a job? And I swear to God, I don't know what it was, but I remember saying, I'm not doing any of that. I'm watching my mom and dad have jobs. It ain't working for them, right? So it really was at a young age. So from God, the universe, something I saw on TV, something shifted it, and I knew that I had to do more. And again, just knowing from that kid, I moved into my dad when I was 13. I ended up working with him in his collision shop and his auto sales, and again, watched him work really hard. I knew there was a better way. And at a young age, I was smart enough. I was going to say I'm smart. I was lucky enough. Let's just get it. Let's get it right. Our stories evolve and change, right? I was lucky enough to see Dad's working hard. He's miserable all the time. Gets mad easy. Yells, fist fights with people. Doesn't have money. And then I met some other people that were the same age or a little older than my dad. And they were doing cool, man. They were the wealthiest people in my tiny town, and they seemed calm. Like I'd meet them and go, "Hey, you're a good young kid," and like I'd do something, and it was just different. I don't know how to explain it. It was like this sense of inner peace. But they had money, so I just remember thinking, I want to do more of what those guys do.
Yeah, I remember experiencing something fairly similar. I was a little bit older. I was already married. I was 20, 21, and we just got married and moved away from home for the first time ever. I grew up in a really small religious bubble, and so what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I went to ministerial school. I was going to be a youth pastor. I have my degrees in Bible and church ministries, all that kind of stuff. And when I had figured out, growing up all the time, you hear people with money, or they're chasing the things of the world or whatever, and the love of money is the root of all evil and all that stuff. So, I got out and I started experiencing something that was contrary to the things that I had been told, which sounds like exactly what you were going through, where I would meet somebody who had a bunch of money, who seemed to be a really good person, who helped a lot of people, they were happy, they weren't
healthy,
evil,
they didn't have horns.
Exactly. They weren't out to get you all the time. And I was just like, wait a second, So if you can do all of these things, and you can chase these things and have all of this and still be happy, fulfilled, like run a
and
good
help
life,
other
have a good
people.
family, right. Be a servant-hearted person towards society as a whole, then there's got to be, I'm missing something.
You're missing something, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's really good that you had that realization. That's why you're sitting here today and doing and impacting lives and doing such a great thing for the world, man.
So in addition to that,
Yeah.
what are some other things that you think you did at that time in your life in order to set yourself up for success later on?
Yeah, really good question. So I would say that, and that's why I wrote Millionaire Success Habits. And I'm not plugging books, they're great books, but I wrote that book because I was passionate about it, because I started noticing, and again, I don't know if this was at 19, 15, or 27.
Yeah.
But at 27, I was already on my way. But I started noticing that certain habits my dad had were the same ones his brothers and sisters had, my cousins had, a lot of my family had, that were all struggling. They did certain things. It was a habit. We all have habits, no matter if they're good, bad, or otherwise, right? And I realized that the habits of these other guys that were doing well, and I had this one dear friend, Mark Miller, he's in his 80s, really successful artist and entrepreneur. He just had completely different habits. He'd wake up in the morning and freaking have a routine. He'd meditate, he'd practice gratitude, and then he'd like set up his day, and I'd be like, my dad gets up and just gets pissed.
What's meditate?
What's meditate? like sit in one spot, like hum, and that'd be something my dad like. Oh, those hokey
totally.
people from
Totally.
the West
Yeah,
Coast,
100%.
and that's anti-Catholic.
the hippies.
Yeah, like to meditate and yoga. It's like you're the Antichrist.
Oh, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean. Yeah,
so
I get
you
that
get if you grew up in the
100%,
bubble, but you know Catholics wasn't such a small bubble. It's probably the biggest bubble, but still, if you weren't Catholic, everybody else was going straight to hell.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
And the meditators and those that believed in personal development, not God development. Right. So all those things, but I started to recognize that people had different habits, and I think I started adjusting my habits, and my family was uncomfortable with it, and sat me down like interventions and said, and there was a shift, Travis, there was a shift where I knew every time they would say something was wrong, I knew I must have been doing something right. I don't know when that was. Again, I'm not trying to make this time when the sky opened, the epiphany happened. But there was a time where my dad would say, you're never going to make it. You're hiring someone to mow your lawn when you could mow it. You're never going to make it. And I'm like, I think I'm onto something.
Interesting.
And I just had these little moments and these little epiphanies. And you know what the best momentum for success is understanding when you have little wins. And that's something I really want you to focus on. Like, think of positive reinforcement. If you're going to train a dog, goes out, scratches on the door for the first time, goes out and goes to the bathroom. You give it food, you give it love, positive reinforcement, right? You're teaching your kids not to go on in their diaper, to go on a toilet or get good grades, positive reinforcement. But with ourselves, we will kick our own asses, for lack of a better word, and not give ourselves any credit, even though we're making momentum, we're making strides. We have a great week, and you know what we do? We go on Instagram and find somebody with a new house or looking great, and you go, damn it, I'm not there yet. Or you look at the horizon for the perfect you. You get the first win with your wife, and she loves you, and you've got this connection, or your husband or your kid, and you don't, I got goosebumps talking about it, but you don't go, man, I got to reward myself for that. You go, wow, that's good with my kids, but I'm not making enough money. Right. And then if you're making enough money, you go, yeah, but look at me, I'm 10 pounds overweight. I've been trying to shed this forever. And what we do is we kick our own asses, and we don't reward ourselves. But we reward a dog if he does something good, reward our kids, and we forget that. And I think there was this time in my 20s, and I've never shared it this way, that I saw little wins that were different than my parents. And I had my own collision shop in my early 20s. I was partners with my dad, and then he had some issues in life, and vet went out, and I had Dean Collision Center. And I started making these little tweaks, and all of a sudden, I got Enterprise Rent-A-Car as an account. And I was this little tiny collision shop when all these big collision shops were in the big cities. I was in this little town with a little shop. But the way I was transparent with the rep, the way I built a relationship with that rep, the way I listened to what he really needed, the way I wanted to serve and give back and over-deliver, all these little things I noticed, my dad was the type, freaking take it or leave it or get the hell out of my shop. Well, that led him to $30,000 a year in income. My fourth year in, we hit 200 grand in income. Wow. And I noticed the shift. I noticed that I had different habits. I noticed that my customers and my employees were the most important people to me. Where my dad felt like they all worked for him. And I'm not knocking my dad. He had a really tough childhood, and he was doing the best he could. But I just noticed, wow, if I treat this, and then I got Hertz rental car. And all of a sudden, then I bought 2 tow trucks. And all of a sudden, I'm in this little town. I built the most expensive house in this little town that I lived in. And I didn't do much different than my dad. I didn't go back to college. And this is all
early 20s,
early 20s,
late teens, right?
Late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, wow.
Yep. And then I started getting momentum. So then I owned 30 apartments. I started buying raw land and subdividing and building houses.
Wow.
I had 3 tow trucks. So I had a tow truck company at night. Any accidents around, I'd get all them. Had a collision shop, had an auto sales. I was probably making, I bet you I was living a good life. For a little town, I was a big fish in a little town.
Right.
I was probably taking home $300,000 a year from a kid who came from nothing.
Yeah.
My dad never made more than 10% of that. By then, I think I was already supporting my mom and my dad, giving them money every week.
Wow.
And then in my mid-20s, something really changed. I was already probably on my way or a millionaire because I had done real estate. And, but then, like I said, unlike you have this podcast that we're listening to today, and I hope we'll get to some tactics or strategies. Hopefully one thing you could take from here today if you haven't heard something already. But there was no iTunes, there was no podcast, there wasn't Facebook. I couldn't find inspiration. But late night TV, I watched Tony Robbins on this infomercial, and I had already shifted my thoughts a lot.
Yeah.
But this was like my family and my dad and everybody were to the left. Yeah. I found my way to the middle. And this guy, Tony, is like way to the right saying this stuff that's like, oh my God, I want to believe it. So I said, the heck with it. I bought his course. I bought every upsell. I bought everything he had, and I got it, and I devoured it, Travis.
What do you think it was that attracted you to Tony at that point? Like there was nothing,
nothing
that repelled you?
Yeah, no, nope.
Okay.
You know what it was? Everything I thought deep down that I was afraid to tell people, he was talking about.
He was articulating.
He was articulating. I'm like, no, I think just like that. But if I said that to my family, my dad would be like, okay, you need to go into an insane asylum and get your head fixed, right? So all of a sudden, this guy's way to the right. He's saying all the stuff that I believed. I bought it. I devoured that course. Let me tell you how long ago this was. It was 26 years ago. Wow. I had a Sony Walkman with cassettes on my hip that was like this big. It was as big as a football with the orange things. You can watch it on YouTube as retro now. And I listened to that, and I believed everything he said. And it course corrected. It shifted my life. Yeah. Right, but then he had these other interviews, so he introduced me to Wayne Dyer and Eckhart Tolle and Jim Rohn and Napoleon Hill and all these other books and all these people, and I'm like, oh my God, why didn't somebody tell me this stuff was available?
So all the success that you had been having was all prior to any form of formal self-education, where you are actually on purpose reading books and learning.
Yeah, I never even read one book up.
So this is all like totally stuff that you're just figuring out by yourself and thinking like, oh, there's a disconnect here, but if I do this, this seems to work a little bit. So after that, then after you got the Tony course and started rolling through and started, this entire new world opens up, literally,
God. Yeah, new world.
What do you do at that point? Is this when you start getting into infomercials?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So can you walk us through us through that thought process, because I love the story, Dean. Because first of all, the risk was way bigger back then, right? Like it's not as simple as like running a Facebook account and throwing up a VSL,
exactly.
Right?
Thank you for saying that.
Right. So you take this big risk, put together this infomercial, and you're like, okay, now what do I do?
Oh, exactly. And it's a true story.
Walk us through that.
So I buy off an infomercial, completely shifts my life, shifts my thinking. I didn't know self-education existed. I tell this story a lot, but the truth is my guidance counselor was like, no college? Ooh, maybe you could work on cars or work at the local factory. There was nothing in She wasn't like, hey, you could follow these mentors, you could go to work for someone and learn, you could read these books. Have you heard of Tony Robbins? It was like,
use my link.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry. You're screwed for life. Heaven is over there at college. Not that college is bad, but that just wasn't a path. And I remember listening to Tony, and I'm thinking, why did someone... Like, why doesn't the whole world have this? And what I realized is I had the ambition. I had the drive. I had the work ethic. I was running away from a painful childhood. I was running towards wanting more freedom, more control of my life. Yeah. But a lot of it, I was burning my brain out. Like, the biggest obstacles in my life were between my ears. It wasn't the opportunity. Making money is easy. Like, I don't mean to like oversimplify, but it's easy once you got your foundation, once you have the right habits, once you have the right goals, when you can overcome obstacles. And I got all that from Tony, and it was like I had a string on my back. Like, I never said this before, but it was like, you ever see athletes when they put a little parachute on their back and they do the 50 with a parachute? Right. I didn't realize I was running with a parachute. And I was running with resistance. And when I learned this from Tony and then Wayne Dyer and then all these Eckhart Tolle and the power and now all this great stuff feeding my brain, it's like I unhooked it and I was like, oh my God, I'm twice as fast. I took off the exactly. I wasn't running up a mountain anymore. And I got momentum. And then within 2 years, within a couple of years, I'm like, man, Tony changed my life. I'm already a millionaire. I started with nothing. I got a great story.
This is late 20s.
This is late 20s. I'm like, I want to do what Tony does. I want to create a course and teach people. Like, he gave me a course, changed my life. I want to give people a course and have them give me money and change their life. But just what you said. There was no ClickFunnels account. There was no Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. There was no $50 ads. The only thing I saw was I had to build an infomercial.
Yeah.
So I used every dime I had, credit cards, borrowed money, and I did my first infomercial in 1998.
What do you think? What do you think differentiates people from being willing to take risk and not being willing to take risk? Because
a big enough why?
Not any other. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'll stop the question there.
Yeah, no, a big enough hunger.
Okay.
Like, I'm scared all the time. I'm still scared, man.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, every level. Tony and I are taking on, want to fix the education system, make self-education. I get scared on all of it. And I think we all have those, and I'm going to digress for a second because it's a really great question. We all have two voices, all of us. And I hope you have the voice of strength that's stronger, but I know I didn't. Like, when people say to me, you're such an optimist, I'm like, I think I was born a pessimist who fought really hard to be an optimist. Because my brain always tells me, you're not smart enough, you don't have the right education, you didn't come from the right area, it takes money to make money. Those people were more brilliant, they went to the right colleges, they had family who supported them. My family thought I was insane. That voice is still living inside me. I've been trying to kill it for 50 years or 40 years. Yeah. It's still a voice, so I know you have that. You know, you should keep this job because you have a mortgage. You should stay in this because your family thinks it's a great job. All of those voices are real and they're impactful on your life. But then you have that other voice that says, screw that, we can do this. Like, I must be a little crazy, but we got this. You can do this. You can achieve this. Other people have. You can change your story, change your life. Let's get an empowering story. We can do it. We have both. Yeah. Whichever voice wins the majority of the time is who you become. Simple as that. The voice that tells you, play small, do it when you're older, and 20 years go by. It's not the right time, not the right president. Your wife doesn't support you. Your husband thinks you're crazy. If that voice is just 10% louder, you won't go for the risk. You'll stay in the job for 25 years, and you'll be working and listen to us when you're 55 years old or 60 years old saying, now I need to do it. So just know you have to fuel the voice of empowerment. And if you want to move the needle and take risk, you take educated risk by getting self-education, by gaining specialized knowledge. You don't just freaking go out there blind and hope it'll work. Gain capabilities from people who've already done it. Gain self-education, like I said, obsess over it. And then have a big enough, compelling future. Like, all I know is there's two things that motivate us, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but it's really simple. It's pain and pleasure. So half of you are motivated by pain and half of you are motivated by pleasure. So you could have somebody say, yeah, but you can have the new house, you can have freedom. You're like, no, that doesn't do it for me. Because half of you are motivated by pain and say, well, what if it was 10 years from now and you're still making the same money in the same job with the same feelings every morning when you wake up and you don't feel like a full man or a full woman? You go, oh shit, I can't let that happen. So that means you're motivated by pain. If you go, I don't care about that, but I want the new house, I want freedom, I want to show my kids what I didn't have, then you're motivated by pleasure. You need to have something so compelling that takes whichever one you are. If you're motivated by pain, amp that pain up and say, I am not allowing my life to be like this in 5 years. I don't know about you, 5 years is going like that. My daughter just turned 13. I remember putting socks on her that were as big as my thumb. She's 13, dude. It went by so fast. Everybody told me what it did. Yeah. 5 years is going to go by. Are you going to let that keep you there? And if not, get a big enough reason to move away from that pain. Or if you're pleasure motivated, get a big enough reason to move towards that pleasure. Risk is only something we manifest. There's not much risk when you're calculated and you learn from the right people. It's not like you're going, okay, I'm not doing anything. I'm taking every bit of my savings and I'm going all in today, and if not, tomorrow I'm broke. The world has changed. We can test Facebook ads with $50. When I did that infomercial, it cost me a couple $100,000 to see if somebody would buy order number 1. I don't know. Listen, and we'll get on to, I'd love to share things, but I remember my family always thought I was insane. Yeah. You might have those same experiences, and everybody out there who's wanting another level, you're going to have people think you're nuts. When I took, now you got to understand something, from nothing, I'm in this little town with the most expensive house in this little town. I built my dream home. I have a collision shop. I have an auto sales. I have a tow truck company. I'm building houses, and I have 20 apartments. And I take everything I got and I gamble on an infomercial. Yeah. You talk about people thinking I'm crazy. Right. My sister came from Virginia for like an intervention. You know, when someone's on drugs or alcohol, literally sat me down like an intervention, said, you've gone too far. Yeah. I'm really proud of you. My sister said to me, when is enough enough? Yeah. Right? And I remember thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe. And then that voice came in. You're not smart enough. You're going to screw this up. You're going to fail. Everybody's going to laugh at you. They're going to be right. And luckily, this other voice was just a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
And I failed 3 times since then. Just so you know, it wasn't the straight up paradise, everything's perfect, sleepless night, stress, failed 3 times. And every time I failed, I had that same thought of, you're not good enough, you could do it. But the stronger voice just won a little bit.
Yeah.
The score was like 21-20, right? It wasn't a blowout, but that voice and a compelling future kept me going. And now I'm blessed to, you know, I'm multiple New York Times bestselling author. My brands and companies have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in sales. I've started 13 successful companies. I'm partnered with my dear friend, Tony Robbins, who changed my life. I'm partners with Brendan Burchard and some of the people I respect the most. We're impacting millions of lives. I'm married to the girl of my dreams. I'm having another baby. I love being a dad. And I'm not saying, oh, everything's perfect. I still deal with shit every day.
Yeah, of course.
But because of that journey, because of fueling the right voice, because of having a compelling future, because I know I needed it, because of understanding the pain and pleasure in my own life and fueling the one that drove me, I gained the capabilities. And once and stop me here, but once I got that self-education from Tony, I was a complete addicted. Not only did I want to obsess on it, I've been to 300 days of masterminds. I've spent $1 million in masterminds. It's the biggest unfair advantage of my entire life. I read a book about every 10 days or listen to a book about every 10 days. I not only go to masterminds, I conduct masterminds in groups. And that's why Tony and I got together and wanted to make self-education the new norm. That's why we built a course and a training and a blueprint to teach people how to extract what they know and do masterminds. Because without those, where would Tony and I be? He learned from Jim Rohn.
Right.
If Tony Robbins didn't have Jim Rohn, he might be flipping burgers. That's what he jokes. If I didn't have Tony, who knows where I'd be?
A lot a lot of people didn't have Jim Rohn.
Or Dale Carnegie or Earl Nightingale, or you know. So
really quick, there's one thing in there, and there's so many different takeaways, so many different directions that we could take that. But there's one thing that I really want to focus in on here, and that was the intervention part. The voices in your head, right? The voices in your head being amplified by outside
influences.
Who are confirming those voices and making them the louder voices. That's one of my favorite things about being in masterminds, is that typically they're made up of a bunch of people
that are crazy.
Were those crazy people, right? Exactly. Where their families are like, "Hey, man, are you sure you want to be doing this?" Or their friends are like, "Bro, you know, we're going to the we're going to the bar. You know, like come out with us, right?" And it's made up of all of those people.
Yeah.
So when you get into those groups, it's not just about an experience, and it's not just even about the knowledge that you get. It's just about reinforcing the right voice in your head with the right influences, right? So
let me put this back on you. Before I want to ask you a question. And this is a lot of things that, how old are you now, Travis?
27.
27. This will compound more in your life, I promise you. Congratulations on all your success, man, and marriage and a baby. It's awesome. Perfect timing for you. It's always perfect timing. 51's perfect timing too. But I promise you, no matter what answer you give me right now, it'll grow exponentially. And this is stuff I love giving somebody who's in their 20s and 30s, especially if they're either starting or want to fuel their company. How important is it to control those voices in your life?
It's been everything. It's the environment that really, I think, creates. The environment has created who I am.
Yep.
So I just try to do my best to create an environment that will create a version of me in the future that is the version of me that I want to be, if that makes sense. And I think it sometimes is really as simple as that, is just forging. We have the ability to control our environment. Our environment shapes us, no doubt, right? No doubt our environment shapes us, but we have the option to be able to shape our environment. And I think that if I would not have consciously made a decision to get around the people that would shift my environment in a way to make me believe certain things were actually that I was capable of achieving certain things, where, you know, before I would have been like, not for me, or, you know, maybe in a couple decades, or, you know, all these limiting beliefs that we're hardwired to believe for whatever reason, just you know, from society or culture or whatever familial, you know, influences. So shifting my environment and joining masterminds and reading books and getting around empowering people and belief systems, and then also seeing the evidence that it's actually possible. Seeing other people do it around me.
You are on such a great track, because you need the evidence and you need to feed the right voice inside of you. And one of the few ways to do that is through surrounding yourself with like-minded people, because most of the world don't think like you do. Most of the world doesn't think like those of you listening or watching. Right? Most of the world thinks like the family members we have. They just doing what the generation before them did. So I'm really glad to hear you say that, man, because was there a time in your life, and maybe you're one of the lucky ones, but there's a time in my life where I always thought, I don't need any of the foo-foo stuff. I don't need personal growth. I don't need to read that. I just need the tool. I'm a hard worker. I'm a hustler. Show me how to make the money. I'll go do it. And that's all I thought. And I meet so many people like, yeah, Dean, could you just tell me your biggest marketing secret?
Right.
I'm like, well, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right? And so many times they'll say, if I give you my biggest marketing secret, you're going to put it in play? And then they'll start telling me, well, at first I got to get my wife on board. Yeah. And I got to get out of this job. I'm like, okay, so why would I waste the biggest marketing secret today with the tactics when you're not mentally prepared for success? Yeah. You don't have a big enough compelling future. You haven't decided. You haven't burned the boats. You haven't committed. You're listening to the negativity. You're unsure. You're a freaking dabbler. Right. So you want me to give you my greatest marketing strategy when you're not going to use it?
They want the guaranteed success without having to take any of the risk.
Exactly.
It's to me ultimately what that question
is. And for me is the foundational part eliminates the risk because you make smart decisions and you have the proof of concept. You're surrounded by the right people. You create the compelling future. And you know where the magic comes in? I'm leaning in here because some of you are probably listening, so you're not notice I'm leaning in. But where the magic comes from, I've been blessed to be in business for myself for over 30 years, over 13 companies, thousands of people worked on my brands and worked with me and my companies. The magic comes when someone combines the foundation and the mindset with the perfect tactics of someone who's already forged a path. That's where exponential growth happens, right? Yeah. It's not, every once in a while somebody invents something new. You invent Facebook, you invent this fidget spinner. Right. But that's only 1/10 of, they're one-offs. The people that are successful gain rock solid mindset.
Well, it's so funny you bring that up because I used to think that was the version of success. Growing up, that's what I thought, that I had to invent it was a matter of luck. Yeah. It was just like if I invent the right thing at the right time.
Or if someone believes in you and gives you money for.
Right, exactly, yeah. Like what we were talking about before, yeah. It just gives me millions of dollars to go build this thing, regardless of whether or not it actually works, right?
Right.
But that's what I used to think success was. There wasn't a clearly defined path. It was just like, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll invent Angry Birds.
Exactly.
Next go around, right? Yeah. Whatever the future version of Angry Birds is. Like, I'll get lucky and I'll be one of those people. And I didn't realize that it was just clear, like, no. Just
it's so funny you just said that. There is a path. And was there a time that you remember saying, holy crap, there is a path to success?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right? And it's not about the quick invention.
It was the first time I ever got, so I did door-to-door sales for 6-7 years. I did, training, management, recruiting, selling, all that good stuff. But it was kind of like where your early 20s were, where I was just doing it all myself and just kind of figuring it out. I was just a hustler. You know? And so probably 3 years ago now is when I got into the personal development world. Started listening to podcasts. John Lee Dumas, a big mentor of mine, and one of the first podcasts I listened to.
Good dude.
And I started just listening to all their stuff, and then it just turned me on to this entire world of people, like what you were saying, where I was just like, oh my gosh, where were all these stories, like 10 years ago? Like, how come I'm just now learning about this? And I felt like that being a 23-year-old, whatever I was at the time. And I'm sure people, are realizing that at 40 and 45, and like, man, where was this my entire life? So how can we make sure that we put ourselves in environments that continue to help shape us into who we want to be?
Yeah, and that's why Tony Robbins and I, yes, he changed my life at 25, and I wrote in my journal, someday I want to meet him and thank him. Somebody introduced us together. That's so awesome. Introduced us, a mutual friend, about 10 years ago. Yeah. And
Joe Polish.
Joe introduced us about 10 years ago. And then Tony said, all right, fly out to Chicago. And then we met really quick. And then he said, come down, meet me at my house. So I went to his house for an hour meeting. We spent like 9 hours together. And we just had so many similarities growing up. His mom and my dad were like the same exact human and just all this stuff. And it went great. He canceled all his stuff. I stayed an extra day. And we've been dear friends ever since. Yeah. And both of us have a lot of people that want to do business with us. Him more than me, he's got 20 years on me, right? But still, every day we have people that want to do business. And sometimes it's hard because I want to do business with a lot of people, but it gets numbing because you got to focus on your own stuff.
Right, totally.
So we decided, like, let's just be buds. Like, we didn't do business together for 8 years. It was just friendship. We met 4 times a year. We talked once a week. And then a couple years ago, we just said, you know what, self-education saved our lives. Like, where would we be without Jim Rohn? Where would I be without you? Where would we be without all of this self-education, this specialized knowledge? And we said the world is finally getting it. I don't know if you know this, but right now the world is spending $455 million a day on self-education, a day.
Really?
And Forbes just came out with an article saying it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's heading to $1 billion a day. Wow. So what we figured out, the world's figuring out, like, I could go to college for 4 years or 6 and have this big debt. And then when I get out, what the hell am I going to do, right? There's a whole generation of millennials right now with college debt and don't know what to do, with a higher level of angst. They're waiting 8 extra years to buy a house because they have a loan on
Angst and entitlement too.
and entitlement.
Right?
And
I'm supposed to get this.
Yeah,
job. Check the boxes.
Yeah, and not in a bad way. They're just like, they weren't taught that there's this other option. So what the world is realizing, which Tony and I love, it wasn't that cool when Tony started 40 years ago, and it wasn't even that cool when I started an infomercial 20 years ago. But now people are going, okay, I can go 4 years of college, or I can go to this weekend workshop that somebody's been in this space 5 years, 10 years, 20 years longer than me, and in a weekend, they can condense decades or years into days, and I can start off where they left off. I mean,
have you ever work on it on Monday?
I can work on it on Monday. Have you ever gone to a mastermind and literally went home Monday and transformed your business? Because I have. Been to 300 days of masterminds. And the world is realizing masterminds, groups, workshops, Zoom calls, online, like this online platform has given the self-education this wind. And the world is going there. So what Tony and I decided is like, how do we fix an outdated, broken education system? And how do we make self-education the new norm? That's what him and I have been saying for 2 years. How do we make self-education the new norm? And that's when we decided to take our 60 years combined experience in this industry and say, let's teach people with a skill, an experience, a hobby, a mastery, or even a struggle you went through and now you're on the other side. How do you extract that knowledge and share it with people starting on day one? Right? Everybody said to me, what's the self-education industry, Dean, if you had to sum it up? And I guess the best way I'd sum it up is, what would it be worth, you're 27, what would it be worth to you to spend one full day with your 20-year-old self?
Oh man, a lot.
Right?
I don't know.
There's only two answers.
Exactly.
Two answers I get, priceless or millions, right? That's what everybody says. So that's what the self-education industry is. How many people today do you think are starting off where you were when you were 20? Hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions, right? Starting off today. You have the opportunity to go back and get those that raise their hand, and more now are raising their hand than ever in the tune of heading towards $1 billion a day, saying, hey, Travis, I don't want to spend 7 years figuring out what you did, man. Let's do a weekend Zoom workshop and tell me that. And that, when Tony and I realized that, we're like, okay, but it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. Let's create a gold standard on how people can extract what they know, share it with people, find their ideal clients who want that, get paid, impact their lives, and move on.
Okay, so you sold me on self-education. But take it a step further. Why masterminds? Like, there's courses.
I love that. Great
so
question.
Many different
okay,
types.
so first off, I will never the self-education industry, the knowledge industry, heading towards $1 billion a day. That's made up of books, courses, coaching, consulting, and group training like masterminds and such. I love all of them. They've all changed my life. Like books changed my life. Tony's course changed my life. I've done, I've sold millions of courses, millions of books around the world. Love them all, but here's what I know. I just released my 6th book. Writing a book is a bitch, for lack of a better word. Excuse my language, but it just is. You obsess on it. It takes you a year plus. You look at every word and you're like, oh my God. And then, but when it's done, I have an outlet on how I can sell a lot of books. But most people don't. The average book in Barnes & Noble, that 95% of all books in Barnes & Noble don't sell over 1,000 copies.
No way, really?
Yes.
Wow.
So what happens is someone puts their heart and soul for a year and a half in a book, and then they get a publishing deal, and they're like, yay, they won. They didn't win anything because publishers don't know how to sell books.
They check all the boxes.
That's why Borders is gone, right? It's like, and Barnes & Noble's probably pretty close. So books are amazing, but just hard to make an impact fast. Courses are amazing, but in today's world, you know what Tony and I, we spent almost $1 million creating our course and software for people. Like, it's time to step up the game, and plus we have a whole team to support that course. People aren't just buying a course if it's 4 videos stuck in a Kajabi account. Kajabi's great, but they want a real in-depth course. So a course takes time, effort, energy, which you should do. I think you should write a book and build a course for sure on your knowledge, but out of the gate, probably not the way. Or if you're even doing this, how do you go faster? Even if you're in it, you're going to want to do masterminds. So the third one is coaching. Coaching's another thing. Coaching changed my life. We offer coaching, but still, as a coach, you're usually in the time and effort community. Even if you're take a fitness professional, right? They work for somebody else. Like, hell with this, I'm doing my own thing. I'm going to get $150 an hour or $150 a session. $150, you're still getting paid for that hour. You got to commute. Maybe you get 3 of them a day that you can drive around to. And you're still in the time and effort community. So what Tony and I thought about is all of them are great. You should do all of them. But how do we jump the learning curve? How do we get people to extract what they know or what other people know? Tony started off as a reporter of other people's knowledge.
Yeah, right.
He wrote Money Master the Game. He's not the money guy. He interviewed the top people. So you either report on other people's wisdom or you report on your own skills. But would you rather write a book and take a year and hope it sells? Or how about if we could show you in 40 days how to have 40 people on a Zoom call that paid you, where in 40 days you're giving them the information that can impact their lives.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why we like it's with electronics. We can do Zoom calls, you can do Skype calls, we can do it in person, online. Like there's so many delivery systems that in 30 days you could be in business, and we're watching that happen.
There's a big difference between 40 people buying your book and 40 people being in your mastermind.
Different
financially.
different price points,
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So we just wanted the quickest way for people to make impact. And Tony and I last year we went live. We're going to live. We're going live again February 27th, just once a year. It was amazing. We did the biggest online training that's ever existed. A couple 100,000 people showed up.
Amazing.
And the first question Tony asked on that, and the first question I always ask when I'm on stage, I was just on stage with 10,000 people a couple weeks ago, and 6,000 incredible businesswomen the week before, and 6,000 people in Florida the week before, and I asked them all the same question. At the end of a great life, if you only had one of two options, you could make a great deal of money or make a great deal of impact, who would choose money? Never a single person raises their hand. Who would choose impact? Everyone raises their hand. I said, what if you could do both? And everybody screams. And that's what this industry allows. This is what you're doing, man. I mean, you have the opportunity you've learned so much. You're a voracious learning nonstop. You're interviewing people who have skills. You're taking that information and you're allowing it to go back to the world. You're cutting people's learning curve for a living.
Yeah.
Right? You're helping, you're impacting lives, and there's more lives, just like John Lee and Tony impacted me and other, like, you're impacting someone right now during this conversation. Someone's life is going to course correct and change forever because you drove in a car for 4 hours, you packed up your stuff, you came here, you did an interview with me, and one person's going to be inspired enough to make a shift in their life. And you did that, right? And you get to make revenue for doing that.
It's incredible.
It's like and we want everybody to, like, how do we fix a broken education system? If you have a skill, a hobby, a passion, or an experience, and you don't extract it and share it, you should feel guilty. Like if you die with knowledge in your head, Tony and I want you to feel guilty. That's how we fix this problem. And that's where we're at. So that's why we're so stoked about it.
Man, so much good stuff today, Dean. I could keep talking to you literally for hours. So I'll have to for sure put a cut off. Or else we'll be here forever. One question that I ask every single guest that's ever come on the show. We're at 370 something episodes now, and
wow, congratulations!
Every single guest, thank you, that's come on the show. I've asked them this question. I think I know the answer that you're going to give, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Who you know or what you know, Dean? Which one is more important and why?
For me, it's what you know.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of connections growing up. So, but I know the complete opposite for some people. When you network the right way, I'll give you two quick answers, and I'm sorry to give both because both those have experience in my life. But who you know, because if you don't gain the knowledge, if you don't gain the foundation, if you don't gain the capabilities, when you meet the who, you won't have the depth and breadth to keep that communication alive, right? So I love helping a lot of people, but a lot of times I'll meet somebody so fresh, I'm like, there's nothing I can do to help. This person needs 5 years of experience. There's nothing I can do. I can give them $1 million, they'd be broke in 6 months. And I tell them, go read these books, follow this, and do that. So make sure you have the who, the how. The who, the best way I believe to meet people is don't keep score. Don't ask what people can do for you, is build reciprocity. And if you put enough goodwill out to the world, a lot of times the people you're trying to connect with that you think you need for a partner, for a contact, for a shout out, you're trying and you're not getting anything. If you do it in the right way and you offer to help them in advance, you offer to do things for them, all of a sudden you get a tap on the shoulder from somebody behind you didn't expect. And the world pays you back, God, the universe, whatever you believe in. So reciprocity, if you don't know that word, Google it. Build reciprocity, do things for other people first, and your who you know will build. Well, simultaneously, you need to know the how, or else when you meet them, they're gonna be like, you need a little time. Go ripen and come back when you're a little better. Yeah,
one thing really quick before we move on to the last segment here that I want to point out in your story with Tony was that you guys were just friends for 8+ years before you ever went into business together. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people mess up on when it comes to building relationships, connections. And,
we get hit up in DMs all the time. Says, Dean, can you shout me out? Dean, would you partner with me?
Right.
Dean, can you do this for me?
Zero goodwill.
And when people hit me up and say, hey man, you changed my life. I'd come to work with you for free. What can I do? Not that I want people for free, but I bet you we got 10 employees sitting out in this room from people who hit us up with wanting to give first.
Right.
I already know their heart, already know that they get it.
Right. No, totally different thing there. And ultimately, I think it's because people compartmentalize and they take like a business contact and they make that like, oh, this is a business contact. And then they have friendships and it's like, oh, these are friendships.
Yeah, no, it's all
really
people. It's all feelings.
Yeah, one in the
It's
same.
all feelings.
I got one
let's
quick
do it.
round for you. This is a random round. There's
let's do it.
5 or 6 just really random quick questions here for you. Ready? Here we go. What profession other than your own do you think that it would just be fun to attempt?
Driving a bulldozer.
If you could sit on a park bench with someone, past or present, chat for an hour, who would it be?
My grandmother.
How do you like to consume content? Books, audiobooks, blogs, podcasts, or videos?
Listening, audiobooks.
Give us a glimpse of your morning routine.
Gratitude, my wins from the day before, the wins from the wins I'd like for that day, green drink, workout.
What is your go-to pump-up song?
Either Eminem or I don't remember this, one of an Eminem song.
What, besides business, putting business aside, what is something that you just are not very good at?
Networking, like in crowds.
Okay.
I hide.
Yeah,
I'm
introvert.
a major introvert.
Yeah, totally. As we get everything wrapped up here, Dean, what is one place online where we are going to be able to find you active the most?
Most active would be my Instagram story. Dean Graziosi,
Okay, perfect.
I do a story every single day.
Perfect.
And I think it's working. Our Instagram's growing like crazy.
Dean, thanks so much for coming to the show today.
Appreciate you, man.
Had a fantastic
Awesome
time.
stuff today.
Yeah, appreciate it.